everyone. This is Tom Moore, better known to most of you as Purple Pain from VikeFans.com, and I'd like to welcome former Viking linebacker and coach and current Minnesota Vikings game day color analyst Pete Bercich to the broadcast. Pete, thanks for joining us, and how are you today?
Well, I'm doing well. We're just trying to enjoy the summer that finally has arrived up in Minnesota, and you look at your watch, and it's early getting into mid-July, and the season is right around the corner. So it's exciting. Trying to wrap as much stuff up as you can before you get into it. So it's a little different than preparing as a player, but it's still I'm still looking forward to it. It's going to be an exciting season.
Well, Pete, I know professional football has a rich history in the Bercich household, with your dad, Bob, having played safety for the Cowboys for a couple of years, including their expansion season in 1960. What advice and guidance did he give you growing up on your football pursuits?
It was a unique experience in that my father, having played in the NFL, as far as advice would go, I think the one thing that he just kept a real close eye on was how hard I was working. I mean, the only time I recall my dad ever really, getting after me or getting on me was when he didn't think I was giving 100% of my effort or trying as hard as I could, and leaving it all on the field, so to speak. So it's one of those things where it takes a little luster off of playing in the NFL. I mean, so many kids grow up and it's a dream of theirs, and yeah, it was a dream of mine. I mean, I wanted to take this football thing as long as I could, but then again, when your dad did it, it's not that big of a deal. I mean, if your dad is an accountant, becoming an accountant is not that big of a deal. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So, my father very rarely talked about it. He had one plaque, like one little bit of memorabilia that he had in the house, and other than that, he really didn't talk much about it at all. So, it was all, I was there, I was aware of it, but we never sat around, and he never told stories of the good old days and things like that. So, my father didn't put any extra pressure on me. His position in life and his playing in the NFL, it maybe took a little bit of pressure off, because whenever you look at it, my dad did it, that means I can do it. But he was always there.
Was there a certain point in your childhood or your teenage years where you realized, hey, this is a career I may want to pursue? I know you also, pursued other sports like baseball. When did you know football was the thing that was going to be your launching pad for your career?
I think I figured that out when late in high school, being recruited by the colleges for football that I did. One of the things I did try to keep the door open to was playing baseball. I didn't get the same kind of attention from a college standpoint for baseball as I did for football. I think by the time I got to be 17, I realized, from a mental standpoint, I wasn't geared really to play baseball. I was a catcher, which helped, but baseball is about dealing with failure. It's about hitting 300 and having to deal with the 70% of the time that you don't get on base or you don't get a hit. And I just have trouble with sports where effort doesn't necessarily mean you're going to do a lot better. In baseball, you can try to hit a baseball all day long. Doesn't mean you're going to. When you line up a golf shot, you can try as hard as you can to hit the thing straight, but it doesn't mean it's going to go straight. Sports like hockey, I've picked up just recreational hockey, things like that, where effort really makes a big difference. Is really the direction I wanted to go with football. There's no other sport in the world where toughness, intelligence, and hard work can take you further. There are plenty of people out there who are talented enough. By talented, I mean can run fast enough, big enough, jump high enough, that can play in the NFL. There's only a handful that have enough in the way of fitness, the ability to stay healthy, and work ethic to make it. And so, in that respect, I chose the right sport.
I know you went to high school in Illinois. Were you a Bear fan growing up?
Yeah, I was obviously, a Cowboys fan. I followed that team real closely. One of the things my dad, as an alumni, received was a Dallas Cowboy weekly paper. So I followed that. My dad played for He was still the head coach for many years when I was a kid, so I always did like the Dallas Cowboys. But in the mid-'80s, I mean, how could you not be a Bears fan? You know, with Ditka and the rest, Buddy Ryan, and I mean, the list goes on and on. But yeah, I'm still. You know, I look at it this way. I grew up a Bears fan, and now I'm a Vikings fan, and the one thing we do have in common is our hatred for the Packers, so I just kind of focus on that.
Well, you can never go wrong with a hatred for the Packers, so you're going to be in good company there. I know you attended high school at Providence Catholic, which, from my understanding, is a football hotbed in northern Illinois, and everybody will ask you about defensive positions, but I'm assuming you played an offensive position in high school, and if so, what was it?
I played tight end. I did pretty much. The only time I really came off the field was on kickoff or kickoff return. I basically stayed out there the rest of the time. So tight end on offense and linebacker on defense. So that was I wasn't too upset when my tight end playing days were over.
Were you a blocking tight end or a pass catching tight end?
We ran the ball most of the time. You know, I had my fair share of receptions, but I just enjoyed defense. You know, just defense was just what I like to do. It's the reaction part of it. You know, it's being involved in on every play. That was why linebacker was such a great spot. You pretty much involved in every single play, every single snap. So it was just from a personality standpoint, it was just a fit.
I understand when it became recruiting season, you had several colleges following you, including future Viking head coach Denny Green, who recruited you to go to Stanford. I'm curious, what was your impression of Green during his recruiting visits, and what made you decide to not attend Stanford?
You know, it's funny because Dennis Green, he came to my house. He didn't coach Forrester, who was with the Vikings when I was here. So he paid a visit to my house. I know back then at Stanford, you had to be admitted before you could go out to a visit. So you had to fill out the form, the application form, just like every other student. I did all that. You know, my mom, who passed away recently, she still had my acceptance letter to Stanford. And I think the only reason or one big reason why I did not go out there was my folks were in Chicago and it was in California, and it was just they wouldn't get a chance to see me play too much. I figured Notre Dame had pretty much everything anybody could want as far as an academic institution in football. So, and it was close. So that was really the main breaker, so to speak, there. But I remember going out to Stanford for a visit. I saw my first laptop computer out there. And, half the weight room was outside under a tent. It kind of blew my mind. just how different things were out in San Francisco. So. It was a great experience. I loved that place, and it was my number 2 choice. A very close second choice to go into Notre Dame.
Okay, and obviously you picked Notre Dame, and you played for legendary college coach Lou Holtz. In your opinion, what made him such an effective leader, not only at Notre Dame, but kind of everywhere he went?
For Lou, I think a couple things. Number one is he had his way, and it was his way or the highway. I think he had some genius about him in how he could make practice and day-to-day life so full of pressure. He had a way of putting pressure on people. You're at Notre Dame, you're there to play, and guys would get benched, guys would get taken off the field. I mean, middle of the games, middle of the series, it didn't matter. If you didn't do something right, you would be replaced immediately. And so it was funny because during the college, at the time, we were a very good football team, and the lesser of an opponent that we would play coming up, the more of a maniac Lou would be during the week. And so it seemed like when we played a team that we should beat, his expectation levels in practice and everything, he'd be ranting and raving. He'd be, just crazy. But when we would play at Florida State, it was number 1. When we were number 2, or we'd have that one big game on the schedule, it just seemed as if midweek, maybe 2-3 days into the week, he would really calm down and, really just, say we don't have to be the best team in the country, just the best team in the stadium. His attitude would change, and it was contagious. And I think if you look at Lou and his success in big football games, it was because of that. And so often for coaches, they become ranting and raving and they don't tolerate anything anymore after a couple of losses. Well, Lou was that way all the time. And in the big games, he would calm down, whereas in most situations, when you have the big rivalry game coming up, coaches have a tendency to do what? They tighten up, they get upset, things aren't right. And he was a complete 180, and I think that right there was the reason Lou was successful or most successful, and the reason why teams that he had coached, especially Notre Dame, always performed very well in big games and big spots.
Billy throws, is intercepted. Bercich. And remember the Boston College game, he let one slip away. He said, I think about it every day. Perhaps this will erase a little bit of that memory.
Holtz actually coached in the NFL for a year with the Jets in 1976, and he resigned after only one season with a 3-10 record. And while it was really before your time, why do you believe he was unable to translate his college success to the NFL?
I don't know. That was so long ago.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's one thing where the transition from college to the NFL is very, very difficult because you deal from a time standpoint. I mean, in college nowadays, you spend your time recruiting. That's what coaches do. A head coach is either a very, very good football coach from an X's and O's standpoint and let somebody else do the recruiting, or a head coach has two very good coordinators and then he does the recruiting. Very rarely do you find a guy, let's say like a George O'Leary, who's very adept at both. It's kind of a rarity these days.
They are younger. Quickly, because both coaches come from the college ranks, let's take a look at them. The Jets, with Lou Holtz, in his 30s. Rye, the spectacle, has an understated sense of humor, a little bit in the Will Rogers vein. But he's come to grips with reality with a rebuilding club, because he's learned that all of life is not at North Carolina State, where 2 straight years you can beat Joe Paterno and the Nittany Lions and surprise everyone.
The way you kind of have to do a complete 180 in how you go about things. I mean, when you're in college, you get the respect of the players and everything because it says coach on your jersey. I think in the NFL, those things kind of have to be earned because, you're walking into a room as a head coach with guys who have been in the NFL longer than you have. So any first-time head coach is going to have to get through some kind of vetting, so to speak, from the players and people. And when you're coaching a guy like Joe Namath, who has a bigger personality than you do, I'm sure Coach Lou was not used to that, so to speak. It wasn't a situation where he wanted feedback. It was a situation where if he wanted your opinion, he would give it to you.
Right.
And in the NFL, it's a little bit different.
There always been word that, that was the one thing on his resume that he wanted to correct and go back to the NFL. And in fact, when you were there in 96, there were a lot of rumors that the current Viking ownership group was considering replacing Dennis Green with Lou Holtz. And obviously that never happened. But I'm interested to know, as a player, do you hear those rumors and how do such things affect the team?
You hear the rumors and people ask you, but you don't. It's not from a serious standpoint. I came out of college into the NFL. I was burned out. I was tired, and I didn't enjoy and love the game of football when I left Notre Dame. It's for whatever reason that may be. But when I got to Minnesota and played for Denny and the teammates that I had, then the love of the game came back to me. Keeping Dennis Green around was the best thing that the Vikings could have done. I'm glad that they did, and so that's about all I would say about that. I mean, I think Denny Green was the right guy, and we were a game away from Super Bowl a couple of times under his head coach, under his tutelage, so to speak, and so they made the right decision to keep Denny around.
And when you prepared for the 94 draft, what teams actually showed interest in you, maybe had personal interviews or personal workouts before the draft, and were the Vikings one of those teams? I
don't recall the Vikings having too much interest, and I think part of that reason was Denny and his familiarity with me. I do know one of the funny things about, you didn't see a lot of Nebraska guys and Notre Dame guys get drafted by the Vikings for a number of years. And reason being was that, Denny felt that guys like Osborne in Nebraska and Lou at Notre Dame, the players came out really beat up. I mean, we were full pads all the time, and he felt that the players that came out of some of those schools just didn't have much left in the tank once they got to the college level. Me being a 7th-round pick, it wasn't much of an investment, so it wasn't as if he, completely steered away from that mentality. Atlanta, Detroit, I got a few calls on draft day. And one of the toughest things as a player when you go through the draft is college kids have to realize you're not drafted by how good of a college player you were. It's about your potential in the NFL. And so if you sit there on draft day and you see guys that you know you're better than go before you, but physically they may be more gifted, and so they have more potential. And you're drafted by your potential. You're not drafted by how good of a college player you were. And that's a swallow for a lot of guys. And for years I felt, I was looked over and I should have been higher than a 7th-round pick, blah, blah, blah. But after I got into coaching and did some scouting and did those things myself, I realized I went right where I should have. And, so the college draft is a projection of how you're going to do in the NFL. It has nothing to do with how good of a college player you were. Trust me, I've seen a lot of really, really bad college football players get drafted highly. So it's about potential, not about your ability to play the game.
So probably you more than any other person that's around you in the media understands when those long faces start to draw on as a guy's name keeps on getting passed over on draft day, huh?
Yeah. Well, there's only one guy happy on draft day. That's the guy picked number 1.
Yeah.
Everybody after number 1 feels they should have gone higher, and that's fine. And you have to take a step back as a player, and realize that the whole goal is, the goal isn't to get drafted as high as possible, although that may be your agent's goal. That may be, the people around you, some of the, the business side of it, your agent, again, that may be their goal is to get you drafted as high as possible. All you want to do is get your foot in the door and find a place where you can go hang your hat and have a locker and get to work. I mean, that's the mentality that you need to have.
And now in a few weeks, the Viking rookies will face their first NFL training camp. And for you, what were your recollections about rookie camp in Mankato?
It was a little different back then. We had mini camp first, and then we had our developmental, time after that. But I remember going from high school to college, and I remember lining up for tackling drills and seeing guys like, Ricky Waters and, Anthony Johnson and, Jerome Bettis, Lee Becton. The number of running backs that we had, Rodney Culver, that played in the NFL and were good in the NFL, there were just, a lot of them. Mm-hmm. And as big of a step as that was from a talent standpoint, going from high school to college, going from college to the NFL, now you're lining up against the Randall McDaniels of the world, the Robert Smiths of the world, the Warren Moons of the world, John Randalls. It's a completely different level, and the jump it's immense. And that was the one thing that kind of took me by surprise, was just how quick and how fast these big men were. And then the other side of it was, from a football standpoint, the amount of mental work that you have to do in the game planning and the scouting and the knowledge of the defense that you're a part of was another huge quantum leap. So those are the big things. It's just you're just holding on for dear life. That's really about all you do, and that's why you make an impact on special teams, where you don't have to think so much. You just have to kind of go out there and play.
Right, and when you look at that, for a rookie, how long does it take them, especially in the linebacker position, before that scheme, that understanding of what the game plan is, comes to you? Does it take a full year or more than that?
I think it takes. Man, at that position, there are guys that get it and go from the beginning. But it takes a season, maybe 2. I think that as a linebacker, your best years are probably 3rd going into your 4th season. And if you have some kind of continuity with the scheme that you're running and what you're doing, I think that's about how long it takes.
2nd and 10. And the handoff is to Terry Allen, and he gets pushed back. And a fine play by Pete Bercich, the linebacker who's playing in place of the injured Dwayne Rudd today.
You look around the National Football League, there's not a lot of depth. Minnesota has as much depth as anyone. Pete Bercich can play in a lot of places, can start on a lot of teams.
Now, in '94, after camp was over, you made the Vikings practice squad, and a lot of people don't really understand what the role of a practice squad player is. And can you give us an idea of what that's like, and how difficult is it to practice all week, but then not suit up and contribute on game day?
Yeah, it was. It's exactly, the job is exactly what is how it sounds. I mean, you go through everything. You basically do everything except for the games. I mean, that's really how it goes. And you can get called up at any minute. I mean, it's not a situation where once you're on the practice squad, you're there for the rest of the year. I mean, you can get picked up by another team and made active. You can get activated by your own club. So you've come a long way, but you still have a long way to go. And so week in and week out, you continually prepare yourself. You continually try to get better. Back then, you could practice in pads during the week, so you could still work on technique. And the challenge is staying in really good game shape. I mean, once you get into the meat of the season, practices get shorter. And there's some conditioning. And trust me, Fred Zamberletti ran us. That's like dogs, man. So we stayed in good shape, I
bet you wish you'd retired, when you were there versus after when you left.
Yeah, no, Freddie Zamberletti, boy, he's I don't even know where to begin with that guy, with him. I mean, his knowledge and his thought process and everything. But yeah, we kept in shape, trust me.
Yeah, and then from '95 to '98 and in 2000, you were a standout special teams player. What, in your opinion, is the key to being a good special teams player?
You gotta want to do it. I think that's the main thing. Again, this is coaching and seeing rookies come in. You get these guys that are, if you're not drafted in the first round and anointed the starter, because you haven't earned your starting spot yet. You won your starting spot because you were drafted, so to speak, and placed there. You have to earn on special teams, and so for a lot of these guys, they never played special teams in college, or they hadn't since they were freshmen. And you can't look at it as a demotion. You have to look at it as an opportunity to make the team.
For a regular season touchdown, and here we go from Lambeau Field, with Preston hauling it in at the 3, behind a wedge, and taken down up at the 25-yard line. Nice tackle made there by Pete Bercich.
And from a technique standpoint, there's a lot of, believe it or not, there's a lot of thinking that goes on. And guys like Chris Walsh, who could do so many things from a special team standpoint, they're invaluable, because a mistake here or there, I don't care if it's on special teams or not, can cost you a football game. So dependability, knowledge, but it's really effort, and it's not just effort on the field or in the games. It's effort in your meeting rooms, paying attention during films, doing your film study, watching tape of the return teams, trying to pick up keys and tendencies, communication. There's so much of those things are there that you can use to make yourself better, and a lot of guys just they didn't choose to do that. So that's the key to special teams.
Well, you mentioned,
and you got to treat it like it's your life's blood, man. It's your job. It's what you do. Yeah. You got to treat it as it's important to you as earning a starting position.
And here's the kickoff. Taken on the run by McCardle. Oh, and that's the end of the run. Whoa! 9 yards. Pete Bercich makes a statement.
Just a clean rundown there by Bersich. Trying to get something going, McCardle, but nobody even breathes on this guy as he gets downfield. And that's the kind of Yahoo crazy stuff you need out of your special teams, especially when you're in a playoff run.
Well, you mentioned that, in that answer that you got to want to do it. And back then they had the wedges. How interesting was that to you to get on the field and try to break a wedge on a kickoff?
Well, it's funny. you talk to people about it, and they say, you get out there on a Monday night in front of 70,000 screaming fans, anybody would run through a wedge. And then I look at them and say, yeah, probably. I think anybody would do it once. But would you do it 3, 4, 5 times in a game? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
That's the key. That's, again, and it's a, I wasn't the fastest guy in the world or anything like that, but I wouldn't give up. You just can't give up. You just keep lining up because that's what they're trying to do, and you just don't want to. You're not gonna, take the wedge on two, 3 times in a row, and then that 4th time not, and let someone get 88 and out the gate on you and score a touchdown. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so, but to do that week in and week out. And, in the NFL, if you struggle with a certain return, a wedge return 1 week, you're going to see it again the next 3 weeks. That's a copycat league. I mean, if you can't do something well, they're going to keep hitting you with it. So you want to nip it in the bud for a number of reasons. And you have to, suspend reality. You have to put yourself mentally in places sometimes you don't want to go. But because there's a 275-pound, 280-pound guy that's going to be running full steam at you the other way. And, you have to do your job. And it's going to hurt, but it is what it is.
Well, that's the bonus under Dennis Green that you had, is he not only let you do that for 16 games, he would let you do it more often in the playoffs. So that was your benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. That's extra money, man, so that's okay.
Sure. And you mentioned, playing for Dennis Green, and I'm curious, as a coach, what were his strengths and weaknesses as a coach?
I think as a coach, I think Coach Green was as level-headed and consistent as anybody I'd ever met. He and Tony Dungy, I think, shared that trait.
Now we got to go down to Tampa and get another one. And I'm telling you now, all week, don't have anybody going down to Tampa take a vacation.
I think Coach Green, as a head coach and a coordinator, you have to find a way to put accountability on the players. You can't just come in after a game and yell at them and say they got to do better, they got to try harder. The key and the trick is to get players to make themselves accountable, because as a player, you fear John Randall coming to your locker and ripping on you and making fun of you or telling you that you got to get your head out of your ass much more than you fear your position coach. You fear Randall McDaniel or letting down a fellow teammate much more than you do a coach. And Coach Green had a great way. The way he would lay it out there is in a number of very simple ways. I mean, as a person, he would say, for us to be successful, each of you have to know your role on this team and accept your role on this team. And if you do not, or if you have any questions, come see me. So everybody in that room knew why they were there and what they were there for. Some guys were there to play special teams. Some guys were there because they catch touchdowns. Some guys were there because they can throw the ball for 4,000 yards in a season. I mean, everybody was there for a specific reason. So that was never a problem.
Now we've got to build on it. And there are a lot of things that we can do better, but it was clear that we are a quicker team than we were last year, a more explosive team than we were last year, and I think we got that little bit extra drive.
And then the other thing Denny did was he let us know that the system that he had worked. He was with San Francisco when they won the Super Bowl. So when things weren't going well, when you dropped 2, maybe 3 games in a row, we weren't changing everything. We weren't changing the way we practice. We weren't changing our meeting times. We weren't changing this and changing that. And Coach Green would let us know it's not the system. This works. What we're doing now works because it's been done before. And so he made it clear, just like Tony Dungy would. I mean, Tony Dungy had a gift of explaining defense and offenses in a way that anybody in that room could understand. And so when you get a play in a game in a certain formation and the defensive linemen are saying, it's bootleg, and then the safety doesn't get it, that guy sits in that room and defensive linemen are looking at him like, well, hell, if we know that, then why don't you know that? See what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That's the way to make players better, make a team better. That's how you can get through a season where because you're going to lose some games. You're not going to always be 15-1 or 16-0 or 13-3. You're going to have some bumpy spots, and we're seeing teams now, win Super Bowls who are the number 6 seeds and things like that. It's changed a lot, and that's how you do it. And Denny Green had that gift. I mean, he and Tony Dungy and Monty Kiffin and those guys, they all had that gift of putting it on the players, and the players make themselves accountable.
Yeah, and it sounds like, from the description of all three of those coaches, they were very much so calming influences on the team.
Yeah, if there's one way in my career in football that I was blessed is in coaching. I was in 15 years of football, high school, college, NFL, I never had a bad coach. Never had a bad coach.
That is fortunate.
So
very few can say that. That is fortunate.
I was gifted. Yeah. I was lucky. Very lucky.
Well, in '98, that was the zenith for the Vikings, and you contributed that year not only on special teams, but pretty heavily on defense as well during a 15-1 season. What do you recall about that year?
Let's see. From a player standpoint, what I recall was we were kind of in a mode where if we win games, we don't practice in pads on Thursday. And, we won. I remember coming out, I think we practiced in pads maybe 3 or 4 times that whole season. Because I remember coming out of camp, we were beat up, and we didn't have pads on, and we won a couple games in a row, and we just kind of stuck with it.
If we won the game, I would go fishing early the next morning, Monday morning. If we lost the game, then I would not go at all. And so that year, I went fishing a lot.
I mean, eventually they lost to Tampa. But we knew come week 10, 11, 12, we were just fresher than teams that we were going to play. We knew we'd eventually run them out of the stadium. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But from a player standpoint, I mean, that's motivating a player. Money's motivating and all that, but when you know if you win, you're not going to have to put the pads on Thursday and beat the hell out of each other for 2.5 hours, that's motivating. You know what I mean?
Sure.
That's motivation. One of the other things, too, is on a team is expectations. And you see teams like Detroit can continuously struggle. Let's just use them for an example. And you look at the Vikings back then, we went to the playoffs every year but one in my 7 years there. When something goes wrong in the course of a game or in the course of a season, when you are a losing franchise or a losing team, you have that here we go again mentality. Deep in your heart, somebody's going to screw this up because that's what we do. That's what the Lions do. That's what we do. Whereas when we were winning like that, we never felt we were out of a game. It was always, who's going to make the play this week? Who's going to be the hero this week? Is it going to be Chris? Is it going to be Randy? Is it going to be John Randall? Is it going to be Eddie McDaniel? Who's it going to be? And that expectation when you take the field is what's so important. So the defense, you're in a bad spot at the end of the game, we take the field and say, who's going to make the play? Who's going to be the hero this week?
Cunningham, he looks out there, and he's laughing.
And it's almost like the Cowboys' defense can't defend them.
And a lot of teams, when they're not playing well and have a history of losing and have teams or players that are used to losing, when they're up and all of a sudden they get down, it's the here we go again mentality. See what I mean? So in some ways, that's very self-fulfilling. And I remember in '98, it was we never felt like we were out of the game, and we just said, hey, who's going to be this week? Who's going to step up and be the hero?
And I'm interested in that because obviously, confidence breeds confidence. But although, Dennis Green led teams have been to the playoffs a lot of years, they really hadn't had a lot of success until they finally won at the end of the '97 season in a wild comeback with the Giants. Were there any concerns that you were rolling along and all of a sudden you're going to face Arizona in a divisional playoff game? You'd had a week off. Were there any concerns of, can we translate this into playoff success, or was the confidence just so strong you felt like you could get
No, I don't think so. I mean, back then, I think that's another thing that's changed in football is that the bye week isn't always a good thing anymore. Remember back then it was wild card weekend was, these teams that get in the race and, they usually lose in the first week, and then the division winners or the people that didn't get the bye, they're usually playing the number 1 and number 2 seed the following week. You know what I mean? So that week off was a time to rest up. It used to be an advantage. I don't know if it is anymore. I don't know if having a bye going into the playoffs is an advantage anymore because the way the game's changed, the way people practice now, it's different. the league's different now. But the bye was awesome. That was what you wanted. You wanted that week off to rest and refit, and the confidence stays there.
Let me tell you guys, we have the 3 teams that have been 15-1 in the history of the National Football League. All right, give yourselves a round of applause.
Now, this comes from a Viking fan perspective. Oftentimes, they feel like Chicago Cubs fans, and that somehow they're cursed, and the Vikings will never win a big game. And the question that came to us is, do the players ever get the same feeling after devastating losses like the 1998 and the 2000 NFC Championship games?
No, I mean, let's just say this. I grew up a Cubs fan. So I know what your favorite team losing is all about. I mean, the Cubs have. It's not as if we've made the Cubs have made it to 3 championships in the last 10 or 12 years and just blew it. I lost it one way or another. That changes because you look at any roster, and I think every year about 1/3 of it is new. New guys, people from different organizations, and all that. So as a player, you don't know enough. You haven't been around enough. I mean, these guys that are there now, how many guys on that team were there in 2009 to witness what happened in New Orleans? There aren't many. Do they remember 98? No, of course not. Do they remember 2000? No, of course not. So I think that's a little bit overrated, so to speak, from a player standpoint. Yeah. From a fan standpoint, yeah, it's absolutely evident, and yeah, it's hard, but you look at 2009 with the Saints, they had their year, and it's gonna happen to the Vikings too. We won a Super Bowl, and it's probably gonna be a year in which you don't expect it.
And one of the questions always is, Randy Moss. Not much is known about him, and the question we got was, what was he like in the locker room, and was he a positive influence on other players?
The Minnesota Vikings have selected wide receiver from Marshall University, Randy Moss.
I don't know if he was really an influence on anyone, so to speak, but Randy, I'll say this about Randy, one of the things that people don't know about him is he was a very smart football player, very, very intelligent football player, and a very, very hard worker. Randy never took time off. He never, said, I'm not practicing today, I'm sore. I mean, he always put his work in. And you look at the environment that he came into and the leadership that the Vikings had in '98 when he was there, when you had guys like Chris Carter, Jake Reed, Randall Cunningham, Randall McDaniel, John Randall, Ed McDaniel. I mean, you could go on. I can go on and on and on about the veterans that we had. There's no way some rookie's going to come in and upset that. And I think in Randy's career, you'll notice that when he performed well and when he was most effective was when there were people on the teams that were bigger names than him. He goes to New England, Tom Brady's the guy, Bill Belichick's the guy. I mean, Randy's not the number one interview request after a game as maybe he was in Oakland. And I think that made all the difference in the world. But as a teammate, he was fantastic. He was funny. He was, a lot of guys say they don't care, and a lot of guys say that they're honest about everything, and I think Randy's the one guy I think that really was. I mean, he was honest, and, it is what it is. I mean, some people don't like that, but, he what he said most of the time was right. Did he do some things that were just stupid? Yeah, of course he did. But he was a good enough player where he had the talent where he could overlook those things. I couldn't go run over a parking attendant and still keep a job. There's some players abide by rules, some players abide by guidelines. I mean, if Randy was late for a couple meetings, he'd get a talking to and whatever. If I showed up late a couple times, I'd get fired.
Yeah.
I'd get cut. I mean, it is what it is. Right. And you have to accept it, and you can't sit there and say, well, so-and-so gets treated differently. If you have a problem with it, then go to a couple Pro Bowls in a row, and then you'll get treated differently. See what I mean?
Right. What do you think happened with him on the second stint with the Vikings? Obviously, it was very short. I know he clashed with Coach Brad Childress. What do you believe happened in that second stint with the Vikings?
I have no idea what happened.
Yeah.
That second stint. I really don't. Okay. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't know the reasoning behind bringing him in, and I don't know, what happened when he got here. But it was just too much. The relationship was just too much. He had, there's just too much. He just didn't fit with, I think, what Brad Childress wanted to do. And so, unfortunately, it went south.
For your NFL playing career, is there a memorable moment you have as a player?
I think the most memorable moment as a player would be in Green Bay in '98, when Green Bay had a huge long winning streak at home, and we went in there and just hung. I think we hung 40-some points off. That was probably the most satisfying game that I ever played as a pro.
This is Randall Cunningham, and he's going for 7 more, and it is Moss getting position, touchdown. He's unstoppable.
Simultaneous possession goes to the offense. This is Randy. You have arrived.
What a statement.
There's no moss growing on this tundra. Unbelievable.